You're out here again? The screen door opens, then settles shut behind the question. You're already in the backyard chair, angled toward the open yard, one hand resting on the worn armrest, not looking at anything in particular. From inside, it can seem obvious what this means. You don't feel like talking. You'd rather be alone. Maybe you've gotten a little too used to stepping away. But that is not quite it, because the harder part is not conversation itself. It is the quiet effort of staying shaped for it, answering at the right speed, holding the right tone, remaining just open enough to fit the room. Out here, that pressure loosens. The chair asks nothing. The yard does not read you. And if sitting here feels this necessary, then the solitude is probably protecting something more important than distance. And then something quieter starts to show up. You shift a little deeper into the chair, your fingers pressing lightly into the armrest, as if the body needs to confirm where it is. The yard is still. No one is waiting for your reaction. No one is watching your face for the right tone, the right answer, the right amount of warmth. That is part of what changes out here. Inside, even in a good home, there can be a soft, constant pressure to stay readable, to stay socially available, to keep adjusting yourself just enough so the room stays easy for everyone else. Most of the time, you do it without thinking. But that does not mean it costs nothing. Out here, that layer drops. The quiet is not empty. It is earned quiet. A kind of space where you do not have to keep shaping yourself in real time. And once that starts to matter, the chair is no longer just a place to sit. It becomes one of the few places where your nervous system is allowed to stop negotiating and simply settle. The back door closes behind you with a softer sound than it used to, and the house becomes something you can hear without having to answer. A dish set down, a voice in another room. The ordinary movement of home continues, but for a moment, it is no longer moving through you. That matters more than it might seem. For a long time, life may have trained you to stay responsive, to notice what needed doing, to catch the shift in a voice, the change in a plan, the thing that was about to fall to you before anyone even asked. You lived inside roles that required attention, usefulness, and a steady outward shape. And often, you carried that shape so well that no one noticed how much inner adjustment it took. Now the pace may be different. The demands may be lighter or just less clear. But the habit of staying tuned does not disappear on command. So the chair in the backyard becomes something like a threshold. Not a retreat from life, but a place between the social self and the inward one, between the version of you that has learned to respond and the one that needs a few quiet minutes to stop bracing and come back into focus. What makes this easy to miss is that it does not look like strength from the outside. Late light settles across the fence line, and you stay in the chair a little longer, eyes moving slowly over the yard. A branch shifts. A shadow changes shape. You notice small things without chasing them. There is no urgency in it, but there is precision. That precision is part of the strength. You have learned how to feel the moment when your inner state starts to drift. Not collapse, not crisis. Just that subtle feeling of being pulled slightly away from yourself by too much response, too much adjustment, too much outer contact all at once. And instead of pushing through it until the strain hardens, you step out here before it does. That is not fragility. It is a refined kind of self-knowledge. But the trouble is that quiet strengths rarely look impressive. They often look like distance right up until the moment you realize they were holding a person together. And this is where the cost begins to show up, even when no one means to name it that way. By evening, the chair is still in the same place, and you find yourself coming back to it again. Not because anything dramatic happened inside, not because anyone was cruel, just because something in you has started to rely on this small return more than you might have expected. That reliance can be easy to miss at first. The chair gives you back a sense of internal alignment. It helps you feel correctly sized again. But the more dependable that feeling becomes, the more noticeable its absence can feel everywhere else. Time inside the house may start to feel shorter, thinner, less complete until you have had this moment. Conversations may not feel wrong, but they may feel slightly more effortful than they once did. And that is the hidden cost. What helps you preserve yourself can also make other spaces feel harder to inhabit for long. The earned quiet keeps you steady. but it can also turn into something you need before you fully feel like yourself again. And this is where people often read it wrong. The door opens partway, and someone leans out just enough to ask, "Why don't you come sit inside?" The question is gentle, maybe even caring, but it carries the assumption that the problem is obvious. You are out here because you are withdrawing, because you do not feel like being with anyone, because the chair has become a way of stepping back from the life still happening in the house. From the outside, that story makes sense. You are separate, quiet, slightly removed from the center of things. And over time, that can start to look like distance, even to people who love you. But inside your experience, something else is true at the exact same moment. You are not stepping away from them because you feel less. You are stepping out here because you feel too much of yourself being adjusted in small, constant ways. They see separation. What is actually happening is restoration. And that gap between what they think they are witnessing and what you are actually doing to stay steady can become its own quiet source of loneliness. And this is where the deeper truth begins to show itself. You settle back into the chair, your hands loosening, your body no longer holding that slight social readiness it carries inside. No one needs anything from you here. No expression has to be managed. No tone has to be softened, brightened, or adjusted to fit the moment. And that changes more than the silence itself. Because the real need is not simply to be alone. It is to be somewhere you do not have to resize yourself. Inside, even in familiar rooms, there can be a subtle pressure to become a little easier, a little smaller, a little more available than you naturally feel. Not because anyone is cruel, just because shared space often asks for it. Out here, that pressure lets go. You are not withdrawing from life. You are returning to a version of yourself that does not need to be shaped for anyone else. If the only place you feel like yourself is when you're alone, it may be worth looking at more closely. And that does not mean you are pulling away from life or losing interest in people. It may simply mean you need a space where you are not constantly adjusting who you are in order to fit. And that space is not what separates you from others. It's what allows you to return without losing yourself. The chair has not changed. The yard has not changed. From the doorway, the whole scene still looks the same as it did at the beginning. Someone sitting outside again, a little apart, a little too quiet, maybe a little too often. That is why it gets misunderstood so easily. They see a person stepping away from the room. What is actually happening is more private than that. You are stepping out of the small, constant work of adjusting yourself and back into a shape that feels natural again. The stillness is not emptiness. It is a way of letting your inner state settle without being pulled in 5 directions at once. And for many people, this is the part that is hardest to explain without sounding cold, distant, or strange. You are not trying to leave anyone behind. You are trying not to leave yourself behind. I'm not withdrawing. I'm returning to myself. The chair is still facing the same open stretch of yard. From inside the house, it would be easy to read the scene the old way. Someone choosing distance again. Someone sitting just outside the life everyone else is still moving through. But the meaning is different now. The chair is not where you go to disappear. It is where you go to stop being shaped for a while. You sit there long enough for your thoughts to return to their own size. Long enough for your body to drop the small readiness it carries around other people. Long enough to feel whole without effort. So when you stand and go back inside, you are not returning from withdrawal. You are returning with more of yourself intact. There is a quiet fear underneath this pattern that many people never say aloud. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of slowly losing the version of yourself that feels most real when no one else is shaping the moment. And when that fear starts to live in the background, a small place can begin to matter more than anyone around you realizes. A chair, a yard, a few minutes with no demand in them. That does not make the need small, it makes it honest. Sometimes what looks like distance is simply the mind protecting its own continuity, the self trying to come back into focus before it disappears into too much adjustment.